Hello friends, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to like and subscribe as it greatly helps out the channel and I'd really appreciate it. Enjoy!
Dive down into our first article titled Close Ties, Near and Far Away, Patterns and Predictors of Geographic Network Range Among Older Europeans. And in this article, as we kind of work through it, the first thing you discuss is network typologies as a way to understand social connections among aging adults. So would you mind elaborating on, these kind of network typologies and why they are, such an established method in this research field?
Yeah, so think about social connectedness as a concept, and it's pretty complex and multifaceted, right? So how connected you are is some function of something like who are the people in your life that are important to you? What are their roles to you? Do you have neighbors, friends, spouses, children? Who are the people that are in your life? How much do you talk with them? How much do you see them? Kind of what role do they play? Do they serve companionship needs of yours? Do they help you when you have troubles? There's many, many different dimensions and facets to this concept of social connectedness. So the idea of kind of topologies is to kind of think about what are the many different dimensions that could be out there? And is there a way to kind of put people into categories and kind of arrange them and to say, this is the kind of person that has, say, a small network comprised mainly of family members, or this is a person that has maybe a lot of neighbors close by, and that's kind of what their network looks like. Maybe this person has a really diverse mix of people. They've got people living far away, some children, some non-kin members of their family, and then maybe they also have a few people living in their household. So it's basically this inductive method to take a bunch of different variables that might describe people's social lives and to sort of say, what are the underlying groups? What are these sort of ideal types that we might find in the population? And that's what we used in this paper. And what we tried to really focus on is we wanted to kind of focus on the relationship that people had to others that were, core in their lives, but also the distance, and try to figure out, are there sort of sets of people that have important people in their lives that live at different distances from them.
Wow. Okay. Very cool. Yeah. No, that makes sense. That kind of understanding, I think, kind of gets to the point of this. Is it's able to cover more or less all the different social networking types that individuals may have. Right? Is that whether it's living with family, being in a, I think as y'all discuss, a very family-centered, culture where, especially something we don't have too much here in the US, and, we might touch back on in the second article, is things like, are you expected to take care of your parents once they become elderly and you become older? And I know that's kind of a gray area here in the US. It has a lot more variability, but, in European countries, at least quite a few, it's almost a, for sure type of thing. And then, let alone friends, communities. So with that, we kind of get into, how important it is between, y'all call it network proximity and the richness, or, could you say effectiveness of social interactions. But something y'all kind of discussed that kind of stood out to me was it seemed almost like having more, I kind of thought of it as, quantity over quality, right? Just having more social connections, interactions was more valuable than perhaps say, a few very strong, ones that you might see or akin to familial compared to just, friends, neighbors. So could you talk about that a little bit, kind of like what y'all were finding or hypothesizing at least?
Yeah, I think it's the case that, this mix of, whether it's more important to have quantity or whether it's important to have quality, it seems like there is quite a bit of diversity in the types of networks that people have. Some people seem to have their needs met by just having a couple of really close-knit people in their lives. Maybe it's not having, quite that whole mix of a diverse range. And there seems to be some real benefits to that. So in terms of whether, if you just have a spouse or maybe you just have one close neighbor, maybe some of your needs could be met in terms of having a companion at home or having someone that can help, shovel the snow, up in the Nordic countries when it starts to snow. Maybe you have those kind of needs, those simple needs in your life met. Maybe for other people, though, having a diverse mix of people, having people that are you can talk to about different issues, not outside of your family, about diverse interests that you might have, people that you might see at clubs or volunteering organizations or in churches. For some people, that seems to be really what's most important, and having this range of different connections. And people kind of asked this question. They've kind of looked at data and kind of said, what is more important, just to have kind of a diverse mix, or one or two really close people? And it seems like for different outcomes or different things we might be interested in knowing about quality of life, those two different types of networks might play different roles. So for instance, there's a lot of evidence that having a more diverse range of people in your life is really good for cognitive stimulation. It helps stave off dementia. On the other hand, if it's just about, say, alleviating loneliness, it seems like the real key is just having at least one core confidant, somebody that's close by, especially that you might live with, that can really help you feel like you belong to somebody else. And so, again, it does kind of a little bit depend on what particular outcome that we're interested in.
Wow. Okay, that does make a lot of sense. I know, especially you talk about cognitive health, staving off dementia, and I think perhaps even in a broader sense, right? This overall sense of loneliness that people have become or experienced in higher level in the past, couple of years due to the pandemic and the closing down, masking, isolation, again, even especially major events. I know here in Texas now you get to experience things like Fiesta, right? I can't remember the last time Fiesta was shut down, but typically it's this huge party, these multiple massive gatherings and events. We already kind of talked about, churches, just, the whole gambit of any sort of social interaction. So yes, those being essentially removed and people having to, find ways to supplement. So the fact that, again, talking about having multiple interactions and how that could still transpire despite the shut off of formal avenues, if you will. Really interesting, and kind of leads to some fascinating results, and just kind of further questions from what y'all were finding and exploring. And so I did have to ask, what drew y'all to study Europeans? Because this is, right, a strict European sample that y'all were looking at. And kind of second point to that question is, to what extent do you think your findings would translate to their U.S. counterparts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Europe is interesting because within this one continent, you have such a diverse range of cultural traditions and institutions and different types of welfare states, within the continent. And so, if you think back even to feudal times, there's this argument that, going back to them, that the Western European countries, the Central European countries, places like Austria, Germany, those sorts of countries kind of developed where people spread out. When people, once they started owning land and once they started farming, they really tended to spread out, and intergenerational relationships tended to be kind of at a distance, even from a few hundred years back. Kind of out of the emergence of that agrarian system. And then if you look at, especially Northern European countries like the Nordic states, there tends to be a much more sense of individualism there, and kind of people are comfortable much more living alone. People don't have as close of family relationships, especially intergenerationally. Then you contrast that with places like the Mediterranean regions, where there's this really strong history of having multiple generations, even living within the same village, within the same home. And so there's kind of sets out these different expectations about what networks look like. Is it more important to have close by face-to-face relationships with kind of just a trusted few, or does social life work more comfortably when people are able to navigate sort of longer distance relationships with people outside of their kinship system, people that they know in other settings, and from organizations, or people that are non-kin. And so that kind of range of different expectations and cultural traditions, I think, makes for an interesting place to compare across different countries.